to say how great it is to be back at my alma mater. I mean, I graduated about over a year ago, and still so much has changed for the better. I mean, my old dorm room isn't even there anymore. It's a parking garage, but it's really great to be back and to be with old friends and new and colleagues, and I think you're going to really enjoy this discussion. I mean, you got some of the greatest minds here as well as from all the other panels, and I think Dave did a great job in putting us after the previous panel, because we'll do some follow-ups from what they discussed on the impact that technology has on our national security, and we'll follow up on that and critique it, and then as well as focus on how technology intersects and impacts the private citizen and the private sector. So quick introductions. I'm Jordan Haley. Like I said, I graduated from Liberty University over a year ago. And from my graduation from here, I started working at the White House in the Office of Presidential Personnel, and I rose to becoming the External Relations Director for that office. And then about a year after that, I moved over with these guys to the Department of Defense, where I worked in special operations and counterterrorism for a while. And then when Chris Miller became acting Secretary of Defense, I had the opportunity to move with Joe and a couple others up to his office in an advisor-like role. So I will just pass it down the line, let you guys introduce yourselves.
All right, thank you, Jordan. Morning, folks. Joe Francescan here, but before I introduce myself, I think I just have to embarrass Jordan here. Graduate in 2020, comes to the White House. She came on an internship, and before she even finished the internship, they hired her to come into PPO, where she was evaluating all of the top senior appointees for President Trump before they could be, as they were vetted, before they were selected for their positions. So I think she participated in Chris's evaluations before he was selected to be the National Counterterrorism Director, and then ultimately became up to the Secretary of Defense. So really impressive, just incredible. She came to me working over at the DoD and the Office of Special Operations Combating Terrorism. So the Navy SEALs, your Delta Force guys, Jordan told them all, okay, I got this, I'm here. And so it was really great to see, and she was an easy choice to bring up to the front office when we went there, when Chris became SecDef. One of the best things, and I know this embarrasses her, I used to have Navy captains and Army colonels would come to me complaining about how hard Jordan was making them work. And I thought this was just fantastic. And I think it really speaks to the credibility of Liberty University and the governance school, the School of Government, rather, and of the quality of people that they put out here. So I appreciate you all welcoming down here to campus and to inviting us here to be able to participate in this. It's really a great honor. And Jordan, it's wonderful. You're a great testament for the student body and for folks that are coming up behind you. But that's, yeah, thank you. So I'm Joe Francescan. I was a career National Security Agency intelligence officer. I worked about a dozen years there, got to go all over the world, spent 3 years in the Middle East. From there, I was selected to go to the White House, so I served on President Trump's National Security Council and the Counterterrorism Office. Eventually rose to lead the Counterterrorism Office, which included our transnational organized crimes and our human trafficking office. So it was really all-encompassing work in addition to the normal terrorists we've been fighting for the last 20-some years. From there, I went over to the Department of Defense, where I was fortunate to follow Chris Miller's footsteps as the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Special Operations Combating Terrorism, again overseeing DoD's approach to all of our special operations forces, all of our terrorism approaches, and the combating human trafficking efforts there as well. And then when Chris was selected to be Secretary of Defense, he asked me, or actually he told me, I was coming up to be his Deputy Chief of Staff to help run the Pentagon. And it was a wild ride that we had. It was 72 days of fun and frivolity, I guess, up until January 6th. But so we get to see all sides of government, good, bad, the ugly, and certainly we're there on the front lines seeing the best of what everyone had to offer. So thanks, Jordan.
Hi, I'm Frank Gaffney. I'm the executive chairman these days of an organization I founded 33 years ago called the Center for Security Policy. And I just want to also pay tribute to Jordan, if I can, quickly, not to repeat what's been said, but I mean, think about it. The meteoric rise of this young woman is extraordinary. But a point I'd love to come back to is a person who is, I presume, in roughly her position today under the Biden administration, is a fellow by the name of Thomas Zimmerman, whose previous job was working at the Chinese Shanghai Academy for Social Sciences, which is renowned source of recruitment for Western spies for Chinese intelligence. What could possibly go wrong having such a person in the Office of Personnel at the White House? Just a quick word about the center and what we do. It's an organization that is intended to champion Ronald Reagan's strategy of peace through strength. I continue to believe it's the only effective approach to protecting our country's vital interests. We do it in collaboration with others on a whole host of issues, and it's a privilege to be able to say that I think over time we've punched above our weight as what we call the Special Forces in the war of ideas. So thank you for having me here today.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Matt Whitaker. Many of you probably may know me from being the Attorney General of the United States under President Trump between Jeff Sessions and Bill Barr. Before that, in the Bush administration, I'd been the United States Attorney for the Southern District of Iowa, 3 degrees from the University of Iowa, undergrad, MBA law degree, and I paid for all of that by running headlong into gentlemen the same size as me playing football for legendary Coach Hayden Fry. It's an honor to be here at Liberty. This panel, I think, discussion moderated by Jordan. I wish I had some accolades to share about you, but we just met right before we came out. But I'm sure after this I'll have all sorts of lovely things to say. But it's really an honor to be here on the campus of Liberty. As I looked through this agenda, I think these are the kind of issues that people that share our values should be talking about. We should be active and engaged. In everything we do and in all facets of our life. And I think these topics are so important. And I look forward to kind of sharing some of my knowledge and experience at the Department of Justice for almost 25% of my life with you kind of on these important topics.
Thank you very much. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Andrew Cote. I spent 8 years as a Marine officer. So for those who were not a part of the panel before this, I wasn't going to go there, but a naval aviator on the panel had some choice words about my beloved Corps. But now you poked the bear, so I'm going to poke back. There's an app on my phone that reminds me a lot of the Marine Corps or of the Navy, and it's Uber. So anytime, so I got one brother there, I got another brother somewhere else, Mr. Rob. Yeah. Anytime we need a ride, we call Uber, aka Navy. They pick us up, give us a ride, drop us off, and wish us luck. So, yeah, don't poke the bear. America doesn't need a Marine Corps; they want a Marine Corps. So again, Andrew Cote from Michigan, was fortunate to serve as a Marine officer for 8 years. The last 2.5 years of my career spent in the White House, and then transitioned to the Pentagon in September of 19, initially serving as the Chief of Staff to the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Special Operations and Low-Intensity Conflict. And not to insult anyone's intelligence, but to provide some background, the ASD for SOLIC is the service-like secretary for all of Special Operations Command. So same customs, courtesies, roles, and responsibilities of Secretary of the Navy, Secretary of the Army, Secretary of the Air Force, same customs and courtesies, et cetera. So we're talking about a 70,000 person enterprise and a $15 billion budget. So really jumping into the deep end of the Pentagon as a young 30-year-old dealing with SOCOM. So incredibly fortunate for that opportunity. And then had the incredible opportunity to replace Joe Francescan as a Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Special Operations and Combating Terrorism. And again, as was mentioned on the panel before this, we talked briefly about the National Defense Strategy. And for some of the students that are listening and those in the seats here, I would encourage you to Google and read the Irregular Warfare Annex to our National Defense Strategy. There's an unclassified version of that you can read online. Obviously, there's classified versions of it that have more language to them. But it's the first document of its kind in our nation's history, and we're very proud of that because it came out of our office. You know, I don't want to say we're on the heels of General Gerasimov from Russia, but that is really kind of forging the next generation of American warfare, tracing our roots back to Francis Marion and the Office of Strategic Service. So I would encourage you all to read that. But again, it's an honor and a privilege to be here moderated by Jordan Haley, I believe was the valedictorian of the School of Government at Liberty. And we're all just hitching our wagon to her. So thank you to be here.
Well, thank you guys for that kind words. I promise I didn't prep them before. So to get started, so a lot of us recently transitioned out of the government or previously had some sort of government experience. From your perspective now, being in the private sector, where can you talk a little bit about, we'll start with Joe and go down the line of the evolution of technology, where it's been, where it is, and where it's going. You know, you have thousands of startups starting in Silicon Valley and elsewhere in the United States, and you have Amazon with their huge supply chain technology and amongst other things that Amazon provides. So can you talk a little bit about that and, you know, kind of where it's going?
Thanks, Jordan. Excuse me. It's pretty simple. Adapt, adopt, or get left behind. I think Tennille put it a great way yesterday where she described the influx of AI coming into government, or coming into technology and to corporations. AI is never going to replace managers, but managers who use AI and utilize AI to improve their processes, to streamline their operations, they will absolutely replace managers who don't. And I thought that was just really great and concise and put forth what it is that we're up against and what it is companies need to do to adapt and survive. AI is a big thing that I see, and I see cyber threats as well. So we don't have a lot of, we have many cyber attacks every day, but we aren't seeing all the full scale of the attacks. They're underreported. Obviously, no one wants to share the details because it's a negative press story. But it's similar to depression and kind of the suicide issue with our vets, where this is something we need to adapt and confront together. This is something that we need to shed light on this, and then we all figure out together what the best way forward is. The Heritage Foundation, I don't want to tout one over another, but they put together a great, and I'm not affiliated with them, but they put together a great advocacy for a national cybersecurity reporting database, and that would encourage and I think require all firms to report cybersecurity intrusions when they occur, because that gives folks a better idea, and I think companies a better idea of what are the threats that we face from our adversaries, whether they're near peer or other, and what is it that other companies are doing to defeat them that they can best adopt those best practices.
I neglected to mention that one of my past lives was as an assistant secretary acting in the Pentagon under Ronald Reagan. And I'll never forget a Defense Intelligence Agency briefer coming into my office at the time and saying, apropos something I knew very little about, in that closet, you could have a biological warfare production facility. And nobody in this office or walking down the hall, for heaven's sakes, let alone outside the building, would have a clue that you did. I mention it because one of the technologies that I'm particularly riveted by at the moment and very concerned about, in part because I do a radio show called Secure Freedom Radio that's podcast everywhere. And I had as an interviewee today Dr. Lawrence Sellin, who, among other things, served in the Army for 29 years, including at Fort Detrick, talking about what we have learned about biological warfare capabilities on a far larger scale than that little office closet out of communist China as a result of its attack against us with a biological warfare weapon called COVID-19 or CCP virus. We can debate whether it was deliberate or not. That's, I think, increasingly likely. But whether it was or whether it wasn't, what we know is it served as a proof of concept for a biological attack that they have built their program to perform. In fact, it's been reported from a private briefing to party cadre back in the early 2000s that the then defense minister of China, a fellow by the name of Chi Haotian, told them that Deng Xiaoping in the early 1990s had started this program, illegally, by the way. They have a treaty obligation not to have a biological weapons program. He started it for the purpose of depopulating the United States so it could be colonized by China. And what we've learned from the COVID experience and looking more intensively at published open source material out of China is they have been designing, in part we now know with research funding from taxpayers of the United States, as well as with Chinese People's Liberation Army scientists working to this day inside the United States, how to tailor biological agents to attack specific ethnicities and other demographics. So this is a technology that if we don't get our hands around right quick in terms of how we do better at defending against it, how we better understand what's being done by adversaries, and it's not just China, unfortunately, I think it's all over the world. But the Chinese happen to be pursuing it particularly aggressively, and I think this requires our urgent attention. Thanks.
Well, that's great news, Frank. This is a great question, and it's probably not enough time in the day to actually explore all the facets. But as he points out, artificial intelligence combined with robotics, I think, is going to be obviously the future. You're going to have more and more remote control conflicts where the warrior is actually not on the battlefield. And reading history, and again, I think we all need to make sure we understand both history and human nature, is to suggest that what is happening in this asymmetrical war against our adversaries, whether it's China, whether it's Russia, whether it's North Korea, is they know they can't confront our warriors on the battlefield. But what they can do is they can affect the people, the population, much like bombing places like Dresden, Hamburg, Berlin did to the psychology of the Germans in World War II. And if you read World War II history, for example, and there's other examples, but you think about how popular belief and the people are influenced by these asymmetrical wars, whether it's cyber hacking and ransomware, whether it is all the other disruptive things that our adversaries are doing to us to destabilize us. This is where we need we are continuing to have a less engaged people, and we need a more engaged and knowledgeable people. And I think it goes back to our founding of our country, is it's a republic if you can keep it. And it's also, our republic requires an active and engaged population, and we are moving away from that. And, again, all of us in this room of faith need to make sure that we go to the source of all knowledge and pray that we are equipped to handle these times and that our republic will survive, because I don't think there is any doubt. We can debate the desire of the CCP to colonize the United States of America, but I will tell you, our forefathers, whether they came yesterday or whether they came 300 years ago, certainly found this a great place to colonize. And so we should never, even though there is currently a Rome, there's a Greece, there's no Greek Empire, and there's no Roman Empire anymore. And so we need to be prepared, and everyone of good faith needs to find ways to solve and approach these challenges of asymmetrical warfare and the kind of things and the technologies that are developing, whether it's curated viruses, whether it's artificial intelligence, whether it's robotics. We need to all be prepared to combat this and think differently than we've ever thought before. And we need kind of an all hands on deck.
Amen. Excellent points. When I'm looking at technology and national security, the facet of the problem that I'm looking at is connectivity. And when you look at the population of the world right now, I think we're at about 7.8 billion people. Right now, we have about 4 billion-ish people in the world connected to the internet today. So again, 7.8 people on planet Earth, and about 4 billion are connected to the internet in some way, shape, or form. By my calculations, by the year 2026, that number is going to look more like 7 billion. So think about that. 3 more billion people are going to be connected to the internet in about 5 years, give or take. So how are we as the U.S. government and the U.S. intelligence community going to be postured, whether it's through human capital, technology, et cetera, in order to digest, synthesize, and understand that exponential increase in data? China has approximately 1 million people, 1 million with an M, dedicated to cyber information operations, et cetera. We're never going to be able to beat them with numbers of humans. We know that. So we're going to beat them with technology. We're going to beat them with our brains, smarter, not harder. The automated process by which we compute that information is absolutely vital to ensuring our competitive and strategic advantage is maintained in the geopolitical space for the next 50 to 100 years, because that new increase in data will allow the nation which is able to understand it to have predictive human economic predictive capability. Okay, so just let that sink in. If we fail to do so, then we will be at a disadvantage for the next 50 to 100 years and maybe even further. So that is what keeps me up at night. How are we going to solve that problem?
So you all touched on the different angles of how China is a threat to the United States, whether it's technologically, whether it's with the virus, and other ways. Clearly, we might not be in a conventional sense war with China, but we are in competition with them at the very least. However, I will say that there is another threat that we are facing at home, and whether China has a direct influence or not in this, I think a lot of people in this room can relate to deplatformed or censorship. And so, Matthew, I'll throw this question to you, coming from a legal background. Where do you see the line of free speech, being able to say what you want, and people being able to say no, that's a threat, that's a security threat? You cannot say that. So what do you say?
The law is not keeping up with technology is fundamentally the issue. And while the Supreme Court, I think, is much better balanced now than it was in previous to handle these issues, there is still the ubiquitous nature of social media and the ability for them to, while not being government actors, to essentially, as we've seen, coordinate with government actors to deplatform, to silence messages that are disagreed with by whoever's in power. And I think that's an incredibly dangerous environment because we need more ideas. This country was founded on the marketplace of ideas, and if we become a place of censorship, either by non-governmental actors or those in collusion with the government, I think that we all lose out. But we also, as conservatives, as Christians, as believers, we need to make sure that we are very careful with how we use these technologies and make sure that when we give our private information to these companies, that we know who we're giving it to. And when we give money to these companies, we know who we're giving that money to. And so if you're running Facebook ads and giving Mark Zuckerberg money and profit, he's probably not using that in your best interest and to a direction that you want to use it. So I say all of that to say this. The law has not kept up with social media and the marketplace of ideas. And I think we're going to see some revolutionary advances in the law. And there's going to have to be through Congress passing laws, reining in, whether it's Section 230 immunity or whether it's just applying free speech to these platforms that look pretty much like the modern day town square. We're going to have to expand our ability to speak freely and to express our deeply held beliefs on some of these platforms if they're going to be ubiquitous in our lives.
Frank, go ahead.
Yeah, a couple of thoughts. To your point, we've got a situation at the moment where we're watching businesses doing restraints on freedom of speech at the direct behest of the government. And that seems to me to be a perfect example of the law not keeping up. That's a First Amendment violation, it seems to me, and it needs to be litigated or legislated as such. But just a related point, back to China. I also am vice chairman of something we call the Committee on the Present Danger of China, and been very, very concerned about both what the Chinese have done to perfect some of these AI and predictive technologies and to use a whole array of surveillance and quantum computing and other techniques to create something they call the social credit system. And we were talking a little bit about it outside. What is being done now by the Chinese is literally aggregating all aspects of the data that is available to their system about their own citizens to control them in a way that is far more frightening than anything Orwell was able to conjure in his time. And it's happening now. To wit, what people say, what people write, who they interact with, where they are, what they do, is all monitored in real time throughout the Chinese empire. And I say empire because what is now happening is they are beginning to export this social credit system globally. Part of it is through what they've been creating, and I think the previous panel talked a little bit about this, with the global infrastructure they call their Belt and Road Initiative. Huawei is a key piece of it, but not the only piece. When you put all that together and then you add health data, which of course is something that they have also been aggregating, you get something that looks an awful lot like what could come out of vaccine passports in this country. And an ability to constrain freedom of speech and freedom of thought, certainly freedom of information, among a lot of other constraints on our freedoms. So I just want to put that into play. This is another technology that is ominous and bears close watching and counteracting.
No, I think those are some great points. And the fact that you pointed out, Matthew, that the law is not caught up to the ingenuity and the new technologies that we're facing today, good or bad, as well as the factor that China is monitoring us. What about at home? What about big government? You know, they have a lot of power, and our founders knew that. So that's why, you know, they wrote the amazing Constitution, and they had each branch separate but equal. So, Joe, I know that you worked in the NSA for a while. Do you see a problem with big government and big tech? Is big government protecting big tech? Are they protecting us? Are they over-influencing their power on us? What do you see there?
I see a whole lot of that, or I guess a mix of all those sorts of things. If you look at the key personnel in the current administration, a lot of them came from Facebook. That tells you something. They're not actually going to break up Facebook in the way that it probably should be. I think there was a public report last week that showed over 1 million AI created, so absolutely fake accounts, not really people. They engineered accounts to look like people and act like people, and those are all run by the Chinese Communist Party, and those are active on Facebook right now. That's not against the law. It's against Facebook's policies, but it's not against the law. And I think it's really incumbent on us as individuals to retake our sense of ownership for government and for where we're going as a society, and encourage and drive our government to make laws that restrict foreign governments' ability to influence us. Because Facebook, like Matt said, it's become the digital equivalent of a town square, and it's something that we inherently trust because we see people that look like us, that act like us online. We may have never met them online, but they give off that sense of trust. And when China comes in with a digitally engineered, created person that steals that or piggybacks on that same sense of trust and then starts pumping in information and ideas that get you to change your ideas about what you think of this society, what you think of our social construct, what the contract between a civilian and a citizen and its government, that's concerning, and that's really alarming. And I think there's a lot that we need to be doing as individuals to push back on this, to call for these sorts of laws, whether it's the breakup of Section 230 or the repeal of Section 230 immunity, and even the breakup of big tech. Someone shouldn't be allowed to control all aspects of your search history, the ads you see, the videos you see, the content that's included in those videos. It's just a completely controlled ecosystem, and I think that should be concerning.
Has anybody had the same experience that I've had, where you're talking about like doorknobs for your kitchen, and all of a sudden you start seeing ads for doorknobs? Or you didn't search for these things? There's no doubt that all these devices and everything around us it's listening. It's listening to us. And right now it's benign. It's doorknobs in a kitchen, but it's not going to be, especially in the hands of a government that wants to influence its people. And you're seeing it play out in real time with facial recognition and all these kind of things, and also location data. I think I've looked at the anonymized location data. It's scary because while you think it's like, oh, look at all these people moving around, you drill in, you can see those 2 cell phones living in that house, and one of them's Frank and one of them's me. We don't live together, but the concept is, and then you can just follow that dot wherever it goes. And I've seen it. If you get smart, you can see, like, if Soleimani had his cell phone, and all of a sudden he stops in one place for a long time. So, it's something to think about as you permit these apps to track you.
What concerns me, and what Joe and Jordan and we saw in our previous roles in information operations and sensitive activities in the Pentagon, when you talk about the profiles that are operating across all the social media platforms, the known terrorists, the known foreign intelligence operatives whose sole purpose in life is to cause chaos and to rip us apart from the inside, right? Those profiles are still allowed to be operational. However, you have soccer moms in the Midwest who have an issue with something, and it's pretty benign, and then they're immediately blocked and removed and shut down for 6 months at a minimum. And I would be very receptive to having a discussion with these big tech platforms to talk about and go through the list of bad guy, bad guy, bad guy, bad guy, bad guy. what are you doing about that? It's a problem because they're trying to rip us apart from the inside, and they're still being allowed to do whatever they want to do on any social media platform. It's very disheartening and upsetting.
So we're talking about threats. We've identified the threat, which is, I think, the main thing and most important thing to start with. But what are the solutions? I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I get scared knowing, I mean, at Matt Matthews' point, I could be talking about something, and then now it shows up on any of my social media platforms, any Google searches, anything like that, and for knowing that I did not go in my phone or my computer and search that, it's now there. There is some type of technology acknowledging what I either thought or what I said to myself or to friends and family that now is getting shown there. And even China themselves, they have a technology that I'm sure we eventually, if we keep going towards an authoritarian way of, you walk down the street, they have a system, the cameras everywhere that identifies who you are, your weight, your height, where you live, all these things about you, so that the Communist Party can track you. And if people think that we are not that far from getting there, we really are. And it is a blessing and a curse to have this type of technology in the United States today and around the world. It really is. So after identifying the threat, what are the solutions? I mean, are we going to go to two separate platforms for Republicans and for the left? I mean, or is there a way to us come together and, curtail this threat and mitigate the concerns that are happening with the over usage and power of the new technology that we're seeing today? Let's go down the line. All
right. I guess one of the easiest things, I think, is we need to compete. In the same way we're competing against China in this space, we need to be competing against the ideologies here at home that are most destructive and are most anathema to our way of life and what we're thinking of doing. So what I see that is, I hope it doesn't get to the point where we just forsake the current social media platforms and create our own, and we have the same issue and we kick the can down the road 10, 20 years. What I would love to see is that we're actually getting out there and challenging those same issues, the same ideas. We know big tech, and we know some of the folks on the left and some of the others, we know how they're doing their technology, but let's do it and let's do it better. So what that means is let's create the narratives. I think someone yesterday in the panel discussion in the evening talked about how conservatives are really good at messaging conservatives, but we don't really have the narratives that fit the left side or to that block in the middle that can be persuadable. So let's improve that. Let's actually develop the technologies that do that, and let's implement them and use them for our good. And let's do that with companies that have a moral compass, because right now that there isn't a morality in a lot of big tech right now. It's simply what's going to make the most money, and that's what they use to justify and to sort of motivate themselves. But it really should be morality at the end of the day.
What Joe didn't say, as I understand it, he and Andy are working on just such a company and technology, so maybe more people can talk with them about it offline. For me, I think it starts with awareness. I think what Tony Teta said earlier about national security mindedness being less and less present in our body politic is insane in the kind of world we're living in. I mean, equally insane is the idea that the greatest threat we face is from white supremacists and Trump voters. And this is not national security mindedness, and it's being malpracticed at the highest levels of our government, which brings me to the ultimate corrective, obviously, which is we need new national security minded elected representatives who are serious about this, and they will only emerge if there is an electorate that gets these issues. So I really commend Liberty and the team that's put this conference together for making national security an important part of the program. I'm privileged to be on it, but it's desperately needed that those who are hopefully going to be monitoring this program from outside this room will take to heart what they're learning here and also what they need to learn more about in order to have a government that represents the people of this country against the sorts of threats we're talking about. Thank you.
And I totally agree with what both of these gentlemen have said, and it's very thoughtful. I think the other thing that we all need to be aware of it is not to only seek out companies that share our values and protect our data, but also that we take back control and start using products that protect our personally identifiable information. I know you know this. I'm just going to say it. There is so much information out there, and when the veteran, the Marine, the rock star to my right, talks about sort of this modeling and the idea that they can take your data and do a predictive model that says 80% of the time you're going to buy their product, if you meet this demographic. They got to first have your demographic. And so I think we need to develop, not on a conservative or on a liberal side, but we need to develop products as a country that protect our personally identifiable information and use those products and make sure, again, that we understand what's out there and that we continue to possess and own our own data and share it with only people that we know, like, and trust. So that's how I would frame that as a solution. But right now, the horse is certainly out of the barn, and it's a very, it's a dangerous, brave new world where, our adversaries can own data related to our individual citizens. But we need to take back ownership of that.
Thank you very much for the kind words. If I was king for a day, I would focus on the authorities by which we execute information operations and military information and support operations, MISO. I would work with HISI, CISI, HASC, and SASC in order to reduce the time and chain and links in the chain of command for us to execute information operations. Right now, all we're doing is reacting to contact, and the Marines in the room will understand that, right? There's a shot, and then we're moving and trying to locate, close with, and destroy the enemy. We need to flip the script and take a proactive approach and put Russia and China, Iran, and North Korea on their heels. Again, we're reacting to contact everywhere on the battlefield in the information operations space, and we're losing, and it's devastating. We have to reduce the number of people who are in the approval chain for those operations. It's something I'm very, very focused on. So quicker we can do that, better I'll feel.
Well, thank you, guys. So unfortunately, we are now out of time, about -1 minute. But can we give a round of applause for our panelists, please?